When we look at the major factions in the 40k universe, the two that are rarely ever in conflict with one another, at least in a wide-scale war, is the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Dark Eldar. I think this is because the Admech cares little about the sorcerous powers of the Drukhari, who prefer to use their technology to create hedonistic elixirs, while the Dark Eldar understand that they can't really feed off of the pain and suffering done to lobotomized and emotionless cyborgs that already can't feel pain. Nonetheless, there are times when the Skitarii legions go to war against the Dark Eldar of Kamara. And with that said, I want to welcome you guys back to another 40 Facts about the 40k universe. I am your host, Gershwan, and today we're going to be talking about Skitarii versus Dark Eldar as we get into the Moon of Gabin. If you guys are new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40k lore videos every single day. If you guys enjoy this type of content, thank our patrons on Patreon. It is because of them that we can do this. Link in the description if you guys want to support us. Also, if you guys have suggestions for other topics, just let me know what it is in the comment section below, or any questions about the 40k universe, just ask down in the comment section below. But with all that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Battle of Gabin. Found in the Corel Minor system in the eastern reaches of the Segmentum Solar, the Adeptus Mechanicus had hoped that the forgemoon of Gabin would escape the notice of the enemy, as it was hidden in Corel's asteroid-strewn depths. But when a raid orchestrated by the Cabal of the Twisted Mantle struck Gabin, its rulers learned that they had nowhere to hide. Following hermetic protocols, the priestly rulers of Gabin had little contact with their parent Forge World. The Forgemoon's religious elite had strict orders to shun outside signals in order to protect their secret work. The cult Mechanicus on Gabin consisted of followers of the radical belief known as Xanthism. This means that the tech priests of that world believed that the powers of the warp should be manipulated and enslaved to the will of the machine god, rather than completely rejected. Xanthites pointed to the holy and ancient machines of the dark age of technology that harness the powers of the warp to tame the tumultuous waves of the immaterium, as proof that it is the machine god's destiny to tame the warp. This belief was strengthened by a shared liberal view of the quest for knowledge and the backing from numerous radical inquisitors who supported the covert projects being done on Gabin. The Xanathite faction had established this fortified archive of biosupplication to ensure their holy work was well defended. Servitor manned orbital weapons arrays and fleets of system monitors peered into the blackness of the void, while cohorts of Skitarii and upgun Cataphrand battle units hunkered in suspension, ready to defend their master's sacred work with their divinely augmented lives. What actually took place at Gabin could only be pieced together later from the fragmented pick saves and by shifting through the soup-like remains of the fallen tech priest brain matter. The first recorded incident was a deep space radiation pulse that knocked out 3 of the watch stations on Corel's furthest fringes. Investigation, repair, and realignment proceeded as prescribed along strictures set in place millennia ago. The pulse's origin was never found, however. 5 orbital cycles passed before a garbled message leaked out of the warp. A freighter, the voice screamed in desperate need for aid. Gabin's lords ignored the signal, as scriptural doctrines demanded it. But over the following 3 cycles, a mounting itinerary of strange phenomena plagued Gabin. First, a cohort of Skitarii were recalled after marching out into the Forgemoon's salt waste. They were claiming to be following divine imperatives. Rising numbers of tech priests requested ocular augmentation, complaining about faulty lenses and not being able to see in the darkest depths of their gene vaults and cryptotheaters. In reality, each of these occurrences was orchestrated far in advance by the scheming archon Radstak of the Cabal of the Twisted Mantle. Now, having tested the tech priest's responses to various stimuli and splitting their stunted attention to focus on as many minor threats as possible, Radstak finally unleashed his forces. Contracted, bought, bribed, and threatened, the Archon had pulled dozens of strings to forge his real space raid. Though many of his allies believed that they followed their own agenda, Radstak knew each of their ambitions and played them off against each other. Many had been warring their way into Gabin's defenses and infrastructure for hours before the Archon's fleet tore reality open. Gabin's atmosphere warped under a bow of immateric energy as a hidden webway portal disgorged the Archon ships, bypassing the Forgemoon's outer defenses to appear directly overhead. Pinpoint shafts of coruscating darkness severed macro couplings to artillery barricades and detonated missiles inside their silos. The conclave of Magi biologists and genitors that ruled Gabin attempted to recall their defense monitors. Through squalls of dire-like interference, some of the conclave ships reported that they were engaging further incursions throughout the system, while others relaying that they were being fired on by other ships in their squadron. Sweeping viral codes released by the Archon's agents spread through intership transmissions, obscuring identification protocols, enacting violent decompression, and issuing conflicting imperatives. On Gabin's salt waste were crawling multi-legged shapes. These were Gabin's motile geothermic spindle rigs. They made their way into their defensive position. These titanic drill-footed contraptions were pulled back to provide protection with their armored bulk. Their goal was to shield the forgemoon's power generatorium. In response, swarms of the Cabal's anti-grav transports and flux of scourges fell upon them. Haywire discharges and dark land strikes crippled Gabin's clanking machines. Some juddered to a halt while others continued on their course, skewering the genitoria with their diamond-tipped stilted limbs. In the dark crevices beneath Gabin's temple forges, contingency power plants fell. They became cold and lifeless as the mandrakes pulled themselves from the shadows and slaughtered the attending engine seers before escaping with their promised prize, the partitioned brains of the overseeing maniples. On the outskirts of Gabin's primary gene vaults, coteries of witches from the cult of the Razor-Eyed countercharged the rushing wedge of sulfur hounds. As the cult's patron, Radzak, had gifted them the razor-edged killing fields and trench lines set up by the Adeptus Mechanicus on the threat-laden caveat that they allow nothing to escape. The privileged trueborn of the Twisted Mantle and the incubi from the Shrine of the Bloody Tear forced their way into the gene vault's outer sanctum. The remaining biological portions of the Skitarii defenders were easy prey to the volley of poison shards, and their blessed bionic augmentations parted like cheap tin before the rain of the clave strikes. Stepping from a personal webway portal that was forcibly redirected by the Drukhari science, the Archon took command. He drove his forces like a dagger into the gene vault's heart, while a dozen separate engagements tore apart the devoted Skitarian servitors. Twisted limb and scar-ridden racks poured into the breach made by the Archon. Their hovering masters of the Grimgeist Coven sent packs of monstrous grotesques into the winding maze of corridors and cryo-chambers, while they swiftly co-opted the Gene Vault's cognitator banks and tracked down the specimens the Archon had ceded to them. Within only 2 hours, the Archon had the entire forgemoon in his grasp. His spies had monitored the station for some time and knew there would be no help coming. Some of the records the Imperium were able to collect suggested that the Drukhari lingered for 3 days upon Gabin after it fell, taking their time over the thousands of captives and draining the vaults dry of every specimen. The only corpse that the Adeptus Mechanicus recovered were the unfeeling servitors and the jelly-like cranial residue that once cushioned their rulers' brains. Thanks for listening, guys, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. This was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.